4? Is that right?
think so.
Crazy, mate. That means it's been
Yeah,
a month.
I
It's a
know.
long time, isn't it?
This has been the longest week, I think. Like usually this time of day comes around quite quickly, but I felt like this week it's been ages because like not much has happened, has it really?
Yeah, I think in the footballing world, there's not really too much going on. I think everyone's just waiting for the season to kind of restart now, and well, luckily it is on
Yeah.
Wednesday. So I think we can get stuck into that. We can have a nice look. We're going to do a nice little quiz as well, aren't we?
Yeah,
To
I think a nice little chilled one before it gets a bit manic.
you stroke your beard there like a
Yeah,
sinister like
very chill.
Bond villain or something. Just need the cat on your lap or something.
Yeah, well, we won't go there, but no. But I've enjoyed the return of European football, the Italian and Spanish. I watched a couple of games. I quite enjoyed it. I thought the teams looked pretty sharp.
You watched some of the Spain games, did you say?
Well, I watched the Barca game last night. Yeah,
What did you do the whole convoluted signing up thing? It's kind of put me off a little bit. You just watch it through Danish
yeah,
TV,
I
don't
watched
you?
it in Danish. Yeah,
You stream it, don't you?
I don't even need to stream it. It's live. Live.
I'm gonna out you to our 100 listeners that you're a criminal.
It's not criminal. We pay for it. I don't.
You don't. No, I was gonna watch it, but it's like you've got to sign up to Premier TV and then get some like
Really.
I think it's free for 2 weeks through Skype. Then you've got to ring them up and cancel. Prem's back on Wednesday. You know what I mean? I've just
Nightmare.
watched that.
Yeah, I quite
Um,
enjoyed it. I think Barca looked good. Thought Inter and Napoli looked good the other night. Quite enjoyed it actually. Just nice, different to Germany. You know, it is. You do kind of notice how different the games are when it's kind of stripped back to just the football. I think.
yeah, I mean, I was very surprised that the Coppa Italia, well, the Italian league in general, obviously hasn't restarted. They went straight in with the semi-final second legs.
I know.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ. No pressure there.
yeah, I know.
Um,
It was
I
interesting.
mean, I caught a bit of both games and they were good. I mean, I've been quite vocal about the whole thing. I like football in as it should be, and I don't want to, not deceive or con the viewer. It doesn't really sound. That's not what I'm looking for. But it's natural, isn't it? There's no fans there. Let's get over it. Let's watch it. And I don't think the sound has been any worse. I think it's been very interesting, and with because I found it really interesting that League Two playoffs are this Thursday. They have not. I think they came back into training not the beginning of this week, the beginning of last week,
Mm.
and they're playing, two of the most important games they're going to have, especially some of those players in their career. If some of those teams don't go up this season, you can have serious like knock-on effects from that.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring that up is because quite clearly, we heard throughout the whole of lockdown, people were doing a bit of fitness, and they really have been. And a lot of people were worried that football coming back and it won't be the same. It's been absolutely fine. Everyone's actually looked after themselves, and it's because there's so much money at stake, isn't there? That you
Well,
couldn't
I think
sack it off, could you?
it is. I mean, you do realize it's their whole life, isn't it? I
Very
think you it kind of I think kind of this goes to show you like how much mentality is in these people and the levels that they're operating at is just kind of completely mind-boggling. You can't even comprehend it because I can barely go for a run because I just can't be bothered. Do you know what I mean? And I
season's going well then, is it?
just hate it. Like I actually hate it. And these people are just crazy, aren't they? Apart
Yeah.
from Rooney, bless him.
But as you say, and it does tend to normally be a bit more of a, well, maybe that's a bit stereotypical for me, but a European mentality. They always talk about how the foreign influx of players increase that in the Premier League, the professionalism. But you do see it in the Premier League now. And I just think when it comes back on Wednesday, people are just going to be absolutely fine. It's going to go straight back in like it's never been away, really. And that's a good thing. And that's why you've seen it across all the European leagues. They're all back now, really. I mean, it is insane. The Bundesliga is nearly finished.
I know.
That's how long it's been back for.
That is crazy, isn't it?
I know. I mean, have you been up to much at all then? I know you've
Not a
been
lot. Not a lot, really. I'm just, yeah, day to day, just dragging
Dragging it, is
past.
it?
Yes, it's
I
getting
feel
getting a
that,
bit much now, getting a bit boring, I think.
yeah, it's gone on for a long time, and I don't really want to get too drawn into the protest or whatever they're going to claim yesterday was. It looked like just a bunch of thugs fighting police to me.
Yeah,
But when you're seeing everyone there, and the Black Lives Matter protest came in for a bit of criticism for not socially distancing, and I understand that criticism, but there was no real protesting yesterday. There was certainly no social distancing. So we've had 2 weeks in a row of that happening, and I obviously completely agree with the Black Lives Matter, and for my two piece worth, they should be protesting.
for sure.
Yesterday, I thought was a disgrace, and I feel as though the whole country is now looking at that, seeing that there wasn't really anything put in place to stop yesterday,
Yeah,
taking place, and now, if you're suddenly cooped up, it's quite a nice day again today. It's just got to that stage, hasn't it, where we're
people
coming
just
back
kind
to
of think
mid-June. It's
it's
been a long
time.
time, man.
Yeah,
Really long time.
no, it really has, and yeah, I mean, it was quite embarrassing. I was embarrassed yesterday. Just just yeah, we won't touch on it, but it's just
No, you don't need to. I mean, I understand that if you feel the need to protect a statue, then that's within your rights to do so. But obviously, the statues were then blocked off by the police,
mm,
so you weren't. I personally, in that situation, would have been like, okay, well, they've done it for us. Great.
yeah.
Let's leave it. Let's not try and fight the police. But
You,
that is what it's kind of come to. And the way it's become like a politics chat or like current affairs podcast.
foreign
But
affairs.
it is just so divided at the moment. It's just so sad to see, like, this
It
country in
is. It
general.
really is. Everything is. And I think also that's having a knock on effect where people are taking those protests and just thinking, oh, well,
Yeah,
lockdown's finished. I can have a party in my garden with 15, 20 people. And it's just like that. That's where people are confusing that because obviously the protest isn't a government instruction. Do you know what I mean? There's something that people have to do, but
yeah,
they're taking that as a then an okay for them to just break the lockdown rules, which are still in place for a reason. Do you know what I mean? And it is
100%.
like you say, it's just divided, and it's a tough time for everyone. I think, apart
But
from the racists.
what'd you say then?
Apart from the racists, it's not a tough time for them, man.
Not a tough time for the racist.
Yeah.
You were thinking about clipping some stuff up and like sending it out. Is that what you're going to do now? You just clip up that little soundbite there.
Not a tough time for
I had
them.
to double take when you said that. But less current affairs. I was last week I was talking about cheesy segues. I was really tempted to do something like we may well be divided, but something that will unite us is the return of.
Should have gone for it. You need to stop bottling doing that. You should just go for it.
Have you noticed what I'm actually doing? So because I do bottle it, I then say it.
I know, it's even worse.
In there anyway. Just trying to.
Just go for it, man.
I'll know. Like,
I'm going to drop one in this episode. Look out for it.
okay, I'm looking forward to that. I kind of like it though because I'm just waiting for someone to come up to me and just like reference it, either good or bad. And whoever that first person is, I'll either run with it or not. I mean, already I think it's a bit out of my comfort zone, and I'm not really pulling it off. And I don't really want to pull it off. I think it's a bit weird if you do pull it off, so I might just leave it there.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah.
It would be nice to chat about the Premier League. Obviously, it is coming back. I think it was probably the second episode, or was it last week? God, when was our big returning?
The second episode, I believe it was.
There we go. Well, basically, something that you spoke to me about at the time was the testing. How it's going to work in terms of someone testing positive and that potentially happening on the day of the game. Now, teams have started playing these, friendlies to get them back up to speed. Obviously, you're quite limited with the clubs you can play against, seeing as half the country obviously haven't returned to playing football. And if you're not a lower league club involved in the playoffs, then you're not back at all. So Spurs obviously end up playing Norwich, despite the fact they're in the same division. And Norwich apparently beat Spurs in a friendly, I think on Friday. but they did so with a player in their team who had coronavirus and is now being confirmed as one of 2 people involved in a Premier League side, whether that's players or staff, to have tested positive. I just want to read out to you what Spurs have said, because they've said that the player didn't come in, to quote, in close contact. But it's very interesting what the definition of close contact they've used is. Now, the statement that came out yesterday, Saturday, said the club were following the government's definition of close contact as being within 2 meters of a confirmed case for 15 minutes or more. Now, that's worrying to me, because that's obviously not going to happen. You know, even if the player's on the pitch for 90 minutes, you could theoretically claim that he has not come into close contact with one particular player for a period of 15 minutes, because that's never going to happen on a football pitch. You're never going to be up next to each other for that amount of time. Now, if they're, to me, people can correct me on this, but from me reading that and not really looking too much into it, that kind of seems like they're bending the rules. Yes, they're going with what the government say, but that government rule isn't in regard to playing a football match, is it? It's, in regard to everyday life. Say if you sat next to someone on a train or a bus, it's not playing centre mid up against, a player. So,
yeah. I mean, again, it's just the worries, isn't it? And you just think he will now isolate for 7 days. He'll miss the first game, but, he has come into contact with people. I mean, it's just, I don't really get it. I agree. I think they're just bending the rules. And, there is it 7 days where 7 days, but the government said 14 days. So,
yeah,
it's a tough one. And I don't believe that. I certainly would feel slightly at risk in that team, because they've been training together, and I don't think that the 15 minutes is necessarily like gospel. But it's a task. I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens. I really can't say much about it, just because I think it was obvious that something like this would happen, and now it's just interesting to see how it kind of unfolds from here, really.
Yeah, and I mean, as you say, it's one rule for as mere mortals, and something different for the Premier League. And I understand why it's kind of 7 days, because you're getting tested twice a week. But if you do contract the virus, it's got to be 14 days until they've said it leaves your system. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think a lot of people have got a big problem with how the Premier League is, basically being treated differently to the rest of society. But yeah, I think the biggest worry for me there is that theoretically, now I've said to you, and I was, as far as I'm aware, players will be tested on the day of the game. But if those tests don't come back in time, then theoretically someone could contract the virus on the Thursday, and then obviously end up playing this game. And it's just a bit worrying that they're going to kind of bend the rules and say it was okay.
Yeah.
But I think, as we've established, coronavirus is just going to be treated as any type of illness now in the footballing world. Whether that's right or wrong, that's obviously the path they've gone down. And you've seen players like Troy Deeney and N'Golo Kante and the rest have, come around, and they're now willing to play. So, whatever they have come up with is obviously good enough for the vast majority of players, because as far as I'm aware, no one is refusing to play.
Yeah.
So there we go. I mean, it's all systems go. It's not going to be perfect, but to be fair, like again, we've said before, the Bundesliga has paved the way for this, and they've showed what you can do and how to deal with stuff. And I just think that's the blueprint now.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, obviously, it being Norwich as well, we can kind of go into where they lie in the league, which isn't pretty for them, and kind of be interesting to see how the relegation. I think probably more interesting from my point of view than what's going to happen at the top end of the table. In my opinion, that's pretty set. whereas the relegation's a bit more open. What are your kind of thoughts on that?
Incredibly open, to be honest. I mean, obviously, it's been so long that I've had to get the table up in front of me just to kind of refresh my memory about exactly where everyone is. So you've got Norwich bottom. They played 29 games. They've got 21 points. Villa ahead of them, played 28 of 25 points. And then you've got Bournemouth. So Bournemouth occupy the last relegation place. But it's them, Watford and West Ham all level on 27 points. And then Brighton above them in 15th. They're on 29 points. I'd like to say Southampton on 34 points in 14th would be safe. But then Newcastle are on 35 above.
I'll leave it there.
And I'm not quite sure if they're safe. So maybe Southampton are going to slightly be, I don't know if they're clear just yet. But, let's say it is a bottom six.
Well, Southampton is Norwich's first game on Friday.
Exactly.
Will it have an effect, do you think? I mean, this whole one person in their team being, obviously you don't know who it is. It could be their best player. It could be.
I mean, it'd be interesting if it was Pookie or maybe Brendan if he's, got back on with Daniel Farker again. I mean, like I said, it's a strange situation where it's going to be just treated as an illness. And in Norwich's case, as long as, it is the only player, I think they'll be okay, certainly for that game. I think the biggest worry for them would be the away thing that keeps on happening. I don't know what you can call it, but I think in the Bundesliga, it's like the stats are like it's up like 40%, I think it is, for away teams to win. Just this weekend, I mean, the only team to win at home is Bayern Munich again. It seems that the top teams are able to, still have this home advantage, but the other teams aren't.
Yeah.
And when Norwich are at home to Southampton, I just think that's probably going to be their biggest worry. As insane as it sounds, the fact that where the game is played is going to really matter. But Norwich's first two games, it's at home to Southampton and it's at home to Everton on the Wednesday night. Yeah. So you never know. They could be really adrift as soon as we get going again.
Yeah. I mean, for me, they will end up where they are now. I think I just can't see them getting out of it, to be honest, in terms of the fixtures left and also just how they've kind of been over the course of the season, I think. Especially with the teams kind of in and around them. I mean, Aston Villa, I quite like to think that they've got it in them to stay up. I'm quite fond of them. I think, and for players like Grealish, for me, I think he's someone who could potentially play for England next summer. And I think that it's very important that he continues to play in the Premier League. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I'm really excited. I mean, I think, like I said before, the relegation kind of battle was going to be more interesting because there was a lot of teams down the bottom end of the table who had some terrible form going into the virus. And, it's probably could be the best thing that's happened to them because it's just given them that break and, everyone's kind of starting on almost a level playing field, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, and you're right to bring up form because Brighton, I think they're the only side out of all the 91 clubs not to have won in this calendar year. And obviously the suspension of the league hasn't really helped them because they're now 6 months without a win, which obviously isn't ideal. But only to be 2 points above the drop zone in that predicament. It's funny because I almost feel as though because we've had such a long time without playing that form will kind of go out the window, but it hasn't really been the case. I mean, obviously my only real reference point is the Bundesliga. The only real team that have completely fallen on their arse is Schalke, who are having a torrid time. But in the Premier League, I mean, I'm going to agree with you. I think Villa will stay up. I think Jack Grealish is obviously an incredibly important player and has shown that throughout the season. But I think it's other players that get underestimated, like Conor Hourihane, who is like consistently good whenever he plays in the middle, and just players like Tyrone Mings. I just think that Tyrone Mings is a leader, and I'm obviously a big fan of him. And they wouldn't have players of that ability who obviously Mings is obviously now an England international. Hourihan's and obviously a fledgling Irish international. But Grealish, as you say, you're spot on with your assessment of him. And I just feel that they do have a lot of quality. For me, I think Watford will be fine. Nigel Pearson, it would have been a bit demoralising having won quite a few games and had some good form and to have not really pulled clear of the bottom three. But for me, in this particular break, I think it's going to help them almost, give them time to kind of reassess. I think Bournemouth will go down with Norwich. And at the moment, I just think it's a toss-up between West Ham and Brighton. I really do. I'd like to see Brighton stay up, and I think they've, certainly got it within them. But it's just going to be how long it's going to take to get that first win. Yeah. They've got Arsenal home in the first game. I mean, in normal circumstances, I think you'd say that's a prime game to. Okay, obviously Arsenal are a big club, but that's the type of game you can win at home. Yeah. I mean, especially.
Then they go to Leicester and then they play against Man United. So
that's what I mean. It's so difficult. You don't want to go 4 or 5 games without winning, obviously, but especially at this point because other teams will be picking up points. And West Ham, I mean, I just don't know. This break could be the best thing to happen to the club, or it could be the worst thing because they have got so many good players. I try and pull a couple out of Villa with Mings and Grealish. I mean, West Ham have got genuinely good players. If this break, you've got obviously Joe Linton at Newcastle, but if Sebastian Haller can come out of it and be the player that he looked like he could be in August, you've got Felipe Anderson. I think West Ham, like I said, will either pull well clear of this and end up finishing something like 12th, or, it's been a long time off, and if things have festered over this 3-month period, you've got to worry about them as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why it's going to be really exciting, just because you just don't know how people are going to react. And obviously there's going to have to be there's a lot of rotation. There's 5 subs, the games are going to be completely different to what they were before. And as much as, you were saying how it will just slip back into normal in terms of the quality. Yeah. But, I think the tactical side of it is going to change a lot in how the games are approached. Obviously having to manage all these fixtures in a short space of time, 5 substitutions, I think that opens the door and probably gives a more advantage to those teams, where Brighton have to play all those top teams, they're going to be having to rest players, rotate, and, you can't say that they're probably going to be full strength. So I think that will kind of help them out in that sense and give those teams down the bottom probably a better chance of getting points, in my opinion.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, I'd just like to throw this question at you. I think you might know, but I know a couple of people won't know. How many points clear are Liverpool at the top of the Premier League?
25.
You've got the table up. That's why I asked.
No, I didn't, but I did know that. It is 25, isn't it? I did actually know that.
I know that it came up a couple of weeks ago on the radio, and someone was like, "Are you joking me?" Because it is. It's absolutely insane. But I think that because of obviously the period we've been in, we've almost forgotten that they lost 3-0 against Watford. It's
well, people are putting that down as the best result of the season. Best game of the season.
I like that. That's good. But
Man City do have a game in hand, though, so you never know.
Well, this is the thing. If they beat Arsenal on the Wednesday, Liverpool then somehow manage to lose the Merseyside derby on the Sunday night, you never know. No, but they will. I think by the Wednesday the 24th, all going well, they'll win the league, and fair play to them. I mean, it's going to be a real shame for them that it's going to be in the situation that it is.
I think so, yes, but then I also just think that they will win it next year. So,
yeah, I mean,
another chance. I can't see anyone coming close. And I mean, obviously, we don't know about Man City and their Champions League situation yet, but if they are not able to play in Champions League, then I think that's just going to mean that the gap's going to be even bigger, personally.
Yeah. I mean, next season is going to be fascinating. As soon as this one finally reaches its culmination in early August, I think they're looking at getting ready to go again in, early to mid-September. But there's so much to be decided in terms of transfer windows. I saw that apparently Liverpool couldn't afford Timo Werner, and that's £55 million. So that's worrying. Quite regularly, you win the league because you have a good squad. Now, there's been exceptions to that where I'd say that Leicester didn't really have that, and I'd say that Liverpool haven't had to use squad players so much. But the whole thing of obviously 3 months without playing, as you've just alluded to there, we're coming back now. We're going to have a lot more games in such a short space of time. There could be injuries. There could be a knock-on effect when that starts. There are just so many different variables that no one has an idea about. And it all, for me, culminates that I think next year is shaping up to be a really open title race. Obviously, Liverpool have it within them to do it again. But I just feel like because they had that season where they pushed City last season, City so close at the end of the season, they've almost had 2 years already of being at the very top.
Yeah.
And I feel like City showed that they could only really maintain that for a couple of years. Now, this break, again, to add another variable, could have reinvigorated them.
Yeah.
And Klopp, because Klopp was speaking loads beforehand when he extended his contract to 2024 about how, or 2022, whatever it was, how he wasn't, it's 2024, how he wasn't really in it for the long haul, how he'll take a sabbatical and, probably won't manage for ages and just leave it and switch off. But, this could reinvigorate him and they could go again. But, I mean, it would be very interesting to see the teams that are challenging next year, whether they'll be in the Europa League or the Champions League or nothing at all. Because looking at the race for the top four, now, obviously, we don't know about Manchester City. The people that maybe don't, now they've had a Court of Arbitration of Sport hearing about the financial irregularities that saw them banned from the Champions League for the next 2 years. But this was obviously appealing to CAS, as it's abbreviated to. And I don't think City know the answer, but the answer is known and we'll find it out in July. Right. Which is strange because I almost felt as though, because this hearing happened earlier last week, from the 8th to the 10th of June. And it's a bit like, well, you surely just come out of it there and there. You made a ruling. It's like going to a court case, then finding out a couple of weeks later. I mean, it's just not ideal, is it? I don't know if City know. I assume they don't. That would be strange if they do. But I'll go on the fact that it will be upheld, although I am fairly sceptical of that. So say Liverpool and City are in the Champions League next year. You've got Arsenal as far down as 9th in the league and Spurs at 8th. Now, they're on 40 and 41 points. Man United are in 5th and 45. But Chelsea are on 48 and Leicester on 53. I mean, I think Leicester will be fine once football resumes. But it's Chelsea. I mean, are Arsenal or Spurs going to make up 8 or 7 points on them? I just don't think they will.
Yeah, I can't see it either, to be fair. I think, but then again, it's like what we said about that kind of that getting going again, and Sheffield United having the season that they've had, and obviously there probably would have been an immense buzz and kind of atmosphere around the club. You'd kind of, I don't know, obviously can't speak for them, but, go after having 3 months off, you'd probably feel a bit like, oh, well, we were doing so well. And now we've got to build all that back up again. It could go that way. And you could see them, start to drop down a few places maybe, especially now that this home advantage, which obviously they were so good at home, now, is it going to make as much of a difference going there? I reckon probably will make a difference, and teams won't be as afraid to go there anymore. So the games that they do have left at home, I don't know how many, but if they are the bigger teams, then I think that gap will get bigger.
Yeah, I mean, Sheffield United are 7th with 43 points, and it's Wolves in 6th with 43 again. I mean, it's right that you bring them up. I still feel as though Chris Wilder would have had them doing, a really strenuous amount of exercise throughout the whole off-season or whatever you would like to call it. But I do agree that it's going to be really hard to maintain those performance levels because you've had such a long time without playing. I'm not quite sure if they're going to be able to sneak into Europe. I'd love them to do it, of course, but I just think that it's going to be a bridge too far at the moment for them. I mean, what will be interesting is a team like Wolves, because, you know, they started in the Europa League qualifying round in July. Yeah. So their season is nearly, by the time it finishes, it would have been on for 13 months, which is incredible. I mean, again, it comes down to this period, how you've treated yourselves. But for me, I mean, the biggest threat to Chelsea is going to be Manchester United, because Paul Pogba is back fit. Now, there's been so much said about him, so much rubbish spoken about him, when this year, I don't even think he's played 10 games. No. So it's been difficult because obviously, you know, you see different things, say Graham Souness, for example. But we're talking about Manchester United and their struggles. And this is a team that have lost 8 times in the league this year, which is obviously far too many for a team like Manchester United. But that's one less than Chelsea and the same as Leicester. So really, it's all about getting wins on the board. And I just feel as though Bruno Fernandes has come in. He's done so well. He's really galvanised the side. He's become a real focal point. And there's been a big discussion about whether you can include both of them in the same lineup. And I just feel that this is going to be Pogba's chance to rewrite the narrative, because so much shit has been spoken about him this year about him playing. He's now going to be able to come in, and this is his chance with 9 games to go to really prove how good he is.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of his, always have been. And, you know, I think if I was in his position, you know, there was obviously a lot of talk about him going here or there. And, you know, I wouldn't have blamed him if he did, because I just think the amount of stick he gets is just mental. You know, for someone who is as good as he is, you know, he's won a World Cup last year, 2 years ago, however long it was. You know, one of the best players for France in that tournament. And yeah, he hasn't been maybe at his highest level, but I don't think the side has allowed him to do that either. So I do think that with Bruno Fernandes in, I think that it will make a difference. And yeah, for sure, they're definitely going to be right on the heels of Chelsea.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's like they can, for me, it'd be Fred. I think he's had a really good season. He's one of those players that there's always that old saying that, you know, it takes foreign players sometime a bit of time to bed in, but it really has been the case with him. I think he's had a really good year, and you could almost have him as a holding player, freeing those two up. And you've got obviously Martial and Rashford. And, you know, I just feel as though for all of Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's faults, and he's had a really difficult time, and I understand why, and I understand why he's an easy scapegoat. But once he's began to actually sign players like Maguire and obviously Wan-Bissaka, but most importantly Fernandes, I do kind of see what Manchester United are trying to build. And obviously their biggest problem is relating it back to the past, and it being since 2013, since they haven't won a league title. And I get that, but it's been so long now, you've almost got to look at them as not a completely separate club, but certainly a completely separate team, because no one remains from back then.
I'd agree with the club statement, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too harsh, but...
not necessarily in a negative way, but teams go through cycles. It happens, you know.
Exactly.
You can't be at the top all the time. Manchester United had over 20 years where they were pretty much at the pinnacle every year. You know, it goes through cycles. Liverpool are going to, I mean, what is it, 30 years? You know, it happens. You go through cycles, and I think that it's not a bad thing that they're kind of having this rebuild, and it will take time.
It will take time, and it has taken time. And I just feel as though, now I've always thought Pogba was off, and it doesn't seem like that's happening. So whether this is the start of, you know, a regeneration of his Manchester United career, he then begins to, you know, shine, or it's a chance to put him in the shop window. I hate that expression, it's Paul Pogba, but everyone knows how good he is. But if he uses it as a means to, you know, really play to the best of his ability, I still feel as though that could be the missing piece of the puzzle. And I get what the club are trying to do. There's so much negativity, but I do finally get it. Now, someone, and this is probably the last two that we'll focus on here before we get onto the quiz and don't have another hour-long episode, which no one criticised, but maybe, I think we might have dragged a little bit. It is the two North London sides, and it is Spurs and Arsenal. And it's fascinating that they're both having such similar seasons. Obviously, both getting rid of their managers, slightly different because obviously Poch had been there for a lot longer than Unai Emery. But we began to see an improvement under Mikel Arteta, and I think we have still seen that improvement. However, I mean, they're ninth. They're on the good form, but it's going to be a monumental effort to get into European places. And I always wonder, with teams like this, in this particular situation, you had Chelsea a couple of years back now. Now, they finished 8th, and I'm pretty sure, or maybe it was even 10th, actually, the season when Leicester won the league. And it enabled them to come back the following season with no European football, especially not playing Thursday nights in the Europa League, which for some reason seems to decimate teams' domestic competition chances. And they were able to win the league. Now, could this actually be a blessing for both Arsenal and Spurs to not finish in the Europa League?
Possibly. I think, yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, they've had obviously major kind of rebuilding periods at the clubs, and I think that for sure it can be. It's, playing that many games is difficult for any team, I think. And I also believe that if you kind of, it sounds a bit strange, but like you don't know what you have until you miss it, that kind of saying. So a year where they're not playing every week, and that might just give them that hunger to then think, actually, no, that is where we need to be. Let's raise the levels, and then they get there again. And when they do, they're kind of prepared for it, maybe in a weird kind of way.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, how do you think Mourinho's tenure's gone so far? Do you think they made the right decision?
Tough question. I mean, don't necessarily think it was the wrong decision. I just think that time will tell kind of how it kind of when was it that he joined again?
Well, I think November off the top of my head. November. I mean, that sounds about right to me.
So I think obviously this summer isn't going to be at a normal kind of transfer window, but I do believe that there'd be a couple of players that he probably wants to get in and kind of build the side to what he wants. And I think that could make all the difference next season, whether they have Europa League or not. So, I wouldn't be as quick to say it was the wrong decision, but I think time will tell, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right that time will tell in all of these situations. And I feel that for me, it's not been the right decision purely for the fact that he's on £15 million compared to Poch was on about 6. And money, for me, does come into stuff like this when Spurs have recently had to take out a bank loan of upwards of about, I think it's 200 million or something. And they've obviously struggled to refinance the club based on the stadium model. They took a lot of pointers from the NFL. I can't remember. I think it was potentially Atlanta, because they had built this amazing stadium, and it's the way that you can finance it. And I know Daniel Levy is, he's very good with his money and was looking at ways to really help the team, because Arsenal, obviously, when they moved to the Emirates, that's why they struggled on the pitch for so long, because they had to sell their best players consistently. Fabregas, Van Persie, Sanya even, Nasri, you're losing so many players all the time, all your top players, and they tried to change that, Spurs. And I just know that decision to bring in Mourinho was a massive financial gamble from the club.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's paid off so far.
No.
And you've got players on like tectonic plates of their career. Harry Kane could quite easily leave. Does he want to be Alan Shearer and stay at his boyhood club and maybe win like a couple of things? Because at the moment, sadly, Spurs have gone back into that category, but they're not quite pushing the top.
No.
Or does he want to go and join one of Europe's best? And then you've got players for completely other reasons, like Dele Alli, who is obviously going to miss this Manchester United game on Friday night because of the gesture, I guess you call it, on Snapchat, which was sent to a private friends list who obviously snaked him out basically, and that's ended up costing him a game. But Ali's had a difficult time, obviously burgled. So these are either his own doing or not his own doing. But the main thing about Dele Alli is he was left out of the last England squad, and there hasn't been an England squad since for him to get back into.
Yeah.
The reason I bring them up is because they were so influential back in the 2015-16 season when Spurs nearly won the league. And they haven't had that influx of players in, which has kind of taken the mantle on. They're still with those players.
And
so
left as well.
And that's why time will tell, and that's why it will be so important. And that's why it's almost frustrating that we don't know what this summer transfer window will be like, because it's hardly going to be summer by the time it actually happens. No. But it will be key for Mourinho, and it will completely depend on how much money he's got to spend. Right now, I think it started off as a bit of a failure, but that doesn't mean that it won't end positively, because at the end of the day, it's Jose Mourinho, and I know some people may think that he's finished now, but he's won a lot in the game, so I wouldn't like to say that to him.
We won't write him off just yet.
We won't write him off, but I mean, as I just said there, Man United are playing up against Spurs on Friday night. That's the second game on the Friday after Norwich Southampton, as we spoke about earlier. Now, that will be kind of when the Premier League properly returns, because that will be the first proper weekend of fixtures. But on Wednesday, we've got Villa against Sheffield United at 6:00, which I'm sure will have the most ridiculous amount of viewing that you would ever expect for that type of game. And then you've got Man City, Arsenal at 8:15. So the Premier League is very much back. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see just how in what way it's received, because I've tried to say before that we've almost set this up for this just unerring love of the game.
We might hate it. We might hate the Premier League by the end of it.
Absolutely think it's absolutely rubbish. And they tried to trial obviously the fake effects, and Sevilla tried to pop some fans in the stadium, which looked like they were from FIFA 2002 by the looks of it. I think it's the World Cup version. I remember that quite well. I've heard some people that loved it. So there we go. We don't know, but it is coming back, and it's certainly something to look forward to, and it certainly gives us something to talk about. But now we're going to do a nice little